Welcome to the video we can review and know about richest countries in the world 2021. Number 9, Brunei. Current international dollars 65,675 is estimated at about $28 billion, more than 50 times that of Britain's Queen Elizabeth. Yet, it is not all roses in the Sultanate, and not just because Bolkiah is no longer the wealthiest monarch in the world, a title he held for many years. Despite the monarch's opulence, and an on-paper per capita purchasing power of over $60,000, malnutrition in Brunei is commonplace. Although data is scarce, it has been estimated that 40% of its 450,000 strong population earn less than $1,000 a year. Luckily, the country was spared the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic with only a few hundred recorded cases. Number 8. United States of America. Current international dollars 69,375. Did we say that the richest countries are also the smallest? That is not the case, of course, of the United States, which during a very difficult 2020 still managed to climb to the top 10 of the list after teetering on its edges for the best part of the last 2 decades. But did Americans truly get richer during the pandemic? It depends on whom you ask. Certainly, not those who lost their jobs and businesses, who found themselves with astronomical medical bills and other expenses to pay, lined up at food banks. However, those in top quintile of the population and earning over $60,000 a year managed in many cases to keep working from home, saw their stock investments grow in value, and received stimulus checks on top of that. Number 7. Norway. Current international dollars 69,859. Since the discovery of large offshore reserves in the late 1960s, Norway's economic engine has been fueled by oil. As Western Europe's top petroleum producer, the country has benefited for decades from rising prices, until it didn't. Prices crashed at the beginning of 2020, then the global pandemic ensued, and the krona was sent in free fall. In the second quarter of that year, the Norwegian fell by 6.3%. The biggest decline in half a century and possibly since World War II. Number 6. United Arab Emirates. Current international dollars 74,245. Agriculture, fishing and trading pearls. These used to be the economic mainstays of this Persian Gulf nation. Then oil was discovered in the 1950s and everything changed. Today, its highly cosmopolitan population enjoy considerable wealth. Traditional Islamic architecture mixes with glitzy shopping centers, and workers come from all over the world lured by tax-free salaries and year-round sunshine. The United Arab Emirates economy is also becoming increasingly diversified. Outside the traditionally dominant hydrocarbon sector, tourism and construction, as well as trade and finance, are major industries. This is not to say that the Emirates were not impacted by the pandemic. The country, in fact, briefly slipped out of the IMF ranking of the richest countries globally for the first time in decades. Number 5. Switzerland. Current international dollars 78,112. Is it really a surprise that Switzerland has the highest density of millionaires in the world? According to the latest global wealth report by Credit Suisse, 14.9% of the adult population owns assets worth more than $1 million. All this money, however, could not shield the Swiss economy from the effects of COVID-19. In 2020, production declined by 2.5%. Yet, things could also have been worse, especially when we consider that in the neighboring Italy, Spain, France and Germany the contraction amounted respectively to 8.8%, 10.8%, 7.9% and 4.5%. Number 4. Qatar. Current international dollars, 100,037. It's not only the oversupply and demand crisis of last year and the exacerbating effects of COVID-19. Despite the recent recovery, oil prices have suffered from a steady and sometimes dramatic decline since the mid-2010s. The per capita GDP of a Qatari citizen was over $143,222 in 2014. Still, the country's oil, gas and petrochemical reserves are so large, and its population so small, just 2.8 million, that this marvel of ultra-modern architecture, luxury shopping malls and fine cuisine has managed to top the list of the world's richest nations for 20 years. Number 3. Singapore. Current international dollars, 107,677. Singapore is an affluent fiscal haven where capital gains and dividends are tax-free. But how did Singapore become so prosperous? When the city-state became independent in 1965, one half of its population was illiterate, with virtually no natural resources. Singapore pulled itself up by its bootstraps through hard work and smart policy, becoming one of the most business-friendly places in the world. Today, Singapore is a thriving trade, manufacturing and financial hub. That is not as saying that it has been immune from the effects of the global downturn. In 2020, the economy plummeted a record 5.4%, knocking the country into recession for the first time in more than a decade. Current international dollars, 111,360. Until recently, Ireland seemed unstoppable. While the rest of Europe was facing all sorts of uncertainties, the Irish economy was humming along. In 2019, when the Eurozone grew only 1.5%, Ireland's economy expanded by over 4.9%, the fastest growing country on the continent. It would only be normal to think that COVID changed that, right? But Ireland defied all expectations once again. Its GDP, according to the IMF, grew by 5.8% in 2020, and by more than twice that, meaning an astounding 13%, in 2021. A nation of just 5 million inhabitants, Ireland was one of the hardest hit by the 2008 financial crisis. Luxembourg, current international dollars, 126,569. You can visit Luxembourg for its castles and beautiful countryside, its cultural festivals or gastronomic specialties. Or you could just set up an offshore account through one of its banks and never set foot again, as many do. It would a pity though. Situated at the very heart of Europe, this nation of about 630,000 has plenty to offer, both to its tourists and its citizens. Luxembourg uses a large share of its wealth to deliver better housing, healthcare and education to its people, who by far enjoy the highest standard of living in the Eurozone. Yet, while both the global financial crisis and the pressure from the EU and OECD to reduce banking secrecy have had little impact on the economy, the coronavirus outbreak forced many businesses to close and workers to lose their jobs. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe for more.